All right, everyone. Welcome to the first masterclass of the Disco Days. Let's start, as always, with the number one priority, safety first. If you were on the initial main stage session, you will already know this, but I just would like to reiterate that be mindful of your emergency exits as well as the emergency numbers. Throughout this session, we will not be taking any questions in chat. I will check it in retrospect, but there will be a collaboration box by the end of the day. So you're more than welcome to come in there. So in order to get us started, I mean, this is the first master session and I think that we need some energy. I need a little bit more of a senior fellow to help me out here. So take it away.
Key to industry transformation, the key to success is developers.
Come on at home. Developers. I can just see it in front of me. Everyone sitting there at home cheering for me and Steve. So this is something that Microsoft realized 25 years ago. So now I urge you to actually reflect upon what is the most important thing to ensure the future success of Sandvik. I mean, it's kind of a leading question, but according to me, to ensure a best-in-class developer experience. This is the first masterclass, as I mentioned. This is shaping the developer experience, Sandvik's journey to a digital frontier. My name is Matthias Falk. I'm the DevEx lead at Group IT, and I'm also obviously a senior developer. And what does developer experience really do? Developer experience is working centrally to ensure that all of our developers within Sandvik can be more productive. So you still ask, why is developer experience essential? And to me, it's very, very simple. It's 10%. And when I say 10%, I understand that a lot of you may start to consider, okay, what is 10%? Is it the amount of productivity gains that we would see across the board on all of our developers when we have developer experience in place? And maybe that be, I hope that the number is a lot higher, but actually 10% is a financial number in this context. If you have a global index fund looking at all of the businesses across the globe, 10% of that index fund is today two companies. It's Apple and it's Microsoft. Add another three companies to that list, so we have 5 of them. It's still only tech, and it's almost 20% of a global index. 5 companies, all within tech. How can this be? We have these giants. And it really comes down to the unique features of software development. So if we look at the classical industry, it can be whatever. You buy some type of resource, you're doing some type of refinement of that resource, and then you try to sell that resource. And hopefully you get the surplus in the end. If we look at software development, it's completely different. You write your line of code once, you can sell it an infinite amount of times to any number of customers. And now what we're doing in software development is that we're servicifying it. So SaaS products. Basically, we pay for our product as a service. That means that we have an infinite number of customers that we can sell it to, and they will pay us over and over again. So we have a continuous stream of revenue. So this really creates the large enterprises. So why should we care about this? We are Sandvik. Well, the case is actually that there is a lot of born in tech competition out there. We may not see that many examples within Sandvik area just yet, but taking the old school example, Spotify versus the record industry. The record industry was caught off guard, and Spotify is now a real big player on the market. Looking at other stuff, Tesla. Tesla was a new brand, born as tech first, based on Elon Musk, as you most already know. And they are coming in, and they are now a bigger company than all of the rest of the car brands together. So they are really big. And we can take it even one step further, and they haven't gotten as far along in their journey. But look at H2 Green Steel, once again, coming from the side, born in tech, and trying to take over classical businesses, in that case, competing with SSAB here in Sweden. So developer experience is key for us to stay relevant to the market. So there is a solution. Over the upcoming 3 years, we will invest 300 million SEK in developer experience. That's exactly not what we're going to do. That's the old way of running the responses within Sandvik. We argue that that's not the way future. So right now in developer experience, we just onboarded our third person. We have been up and running since early this year. So we are early on in our journey, but we need to prove value early on. So it's about adopting an agile mindset. It's about adopting an MVP mindset and start thinking of how can we actually get out to our customers, in this case, the developers, work with them early on and start solving their problems, proving value to a relatively small cost. So if I need to bring it down to one thing, it's about that we must be more productive within Sandvik than the outside. So a developer during the day working at Sandvik must be more productive than the same developer working from home on his private project in the end of the afternoon. If that is not the case, we are truly exposing ourselves to the risk of these tech competitors. I mean, it's not enough to just be better than one on the outside, because there will be other companies that provide better preconditions to be productive and create value than what we will see in the regular world. But at least to start with, that's the baseline that we need to get up to, and that hasn't been the case within Sandvik. So then one may ask, how is this actually realized? We will look at this from 3 different perspectives. First off, it's about sharing knowledge. We need to utilize the size and the collective intelligence that we have within the company. Right now, we are operating as entirely separate islands. We don't learn from each other. We don't share with each other. That's something that we need to target. A second thing would be to start establishing common platforms. And what do we mean by this? We need to start reinvent things all across the organization that is actually shared between all of us. We will get more into detail. And throughout this, we must also remember that we need to retain the autonomy. The autonomy has been a winning concept for Sandvik over the last, decades at least, that we are operating autonomously, but that doesn't need to be that we are operating entirely decentralized. We'll get back to all of these different things. So let's start with the share of knowledge. So what can we actually do in order to share knowledge across the organization? Well, one can think of many things that we could do. One would be community and have events. And I mean, we do this somewhat already in our individual domains, in our individual bubbles. But we need to start collaborate across the divisions, across the BAs. So basically to bring people together that has the similar type of interest, have these type of common events, not only where we share our success story, but also share our failures so that we can learn from each other. That's the way we can truly build and become better, everyone together. What's another thing that we can do to share knowledge? It would be to adopt an inner source mindset. And as this is a masterclass, I assume that most of you are already familiar at least with open source concept. And open source concept within a business is called inner source. So basically we work as if we were doing open source development, but we're doing within the context of our business within Sandvik. So that means that we do stuff, they are internally read. Anyone within Sandvik from any part of the organization should be able to read your code by default. But just on the public internet, there are some things that you don't want to share. May it be that it is a competitive advantage even within Sandvik, or may it be that it's something that is just hidden. It's not launched just yet or something similar. Private when needed is an option. It's there by design. But to have the internal read by default gives so much value. First off, just to know that someone else can read my code usually boosters the productivity, or actually quality, I should say, a little bit, just because you know that someone else may read it. And if I know that this is public to anyone within Sandvik, I'm not very likely to put a password or a credential into the clear text. So it drives good behaviors. But the real power comes from when I run into an issue in my daily work. there is an entire upset of different repositories out there, which I can use modern search and find how have others within Sandvik actually solved this very same problem. So it goes so much quicker to solve things. And in addition, we can start to utilize common packages, even though they are developed for my team and my project. If someone has an, I don't know, let's say authentication library for working with Azure, then that's most likely something that someone else could utilize as well. And it's not specific to their business. Finally, a knowledge base would be really, really good. And when I'm talking about the knowledge base, I'm talking about one common co-created knowledge base. I'm pretty sure that there are hundreds of SharePoints, Azure DevOps wikis, Confluence pages out there, many of them stating the same thing. But first, we are saying the same thing over and over again. We are spending time on writing the same thing over and over again, and we don't find this information when it's relevant. So we definitely can do something better here. So what the developer experience team is working on right now is for the community and events part. There is a Sandvik DevX team in Microsoft Teams. It's public, so anyone can join it. The idea is basically twofold. It is a general channel that pushes out bi-weekly updates on what's going on, what's important within the developer community to be aware about. But then you have all of these other channels, which is really just for the tech community. Get in there, ask a question, discuss the topic. And what is the comparison right now? That you throw a ticket into ServiceNow, where most likely the service desk worker, which is great, don't have the knowledge within this domain. So you will be routed to the wrong team. And then you will start to have this ServiceNow ping pong. So this team can really help you and accelerate when you have those type of need of support. And by also amplifying the needs of support in the organization, we as the DevX team get all of that input on, okay, what is actually disturbing our developers in being productive so that we can solve it once and for all across all of the business. In terms of inner source, we have adopted the GitHub platform. It's one of the centrally provided platforms, but there is a big difference. It's actually operated as a platform. So if we're looking into what group have historically done, and we will talk a little bit more about this in the platform section, it's a lot about actually just providing licenses to the organizations and then leave them to utilize the tools. There's another type of insight into how we operate GitHub, and we will deep dive into that. And for the knowledge base, we are hoping to launch an internal developer portal before summer. We're currently evaluating Spotify Backstage, and just to get this type of co-created development location for tech documentation in its first essence, and then we may very well evolve on it over time. So what could be some things that could be on such a knowledge base? Well, one of the things that I think that could be a good example to have there would be some principles and technologies for how do we do development in Sandvik. Once again, this is not to enforce and say that this is the way that you have to do it. If you have use cases that requires you to do something else in the spirit of autonomy, please keep on doing that. But if you're unsure, or if you just want to look at something to get some guidance on what is the right route in this case, these should be the examples. And these are very early on drafts. There will be work with actually reformulating everything that's here. It will be added some paragraphs to explain exactly what's meant. And there will be a central type of establishing these and deciding upon these different principles. But these have been discussed with several different parts of the business. It's been discussed with central security. So I'm going to bring them up here anyway. So first off, services that can be tested independently. We want to get away from monolithics and tightly coupled applications in general. We want to avoid shared databases. This is a really good behavior to allow autonomy even within the systems as well. And once again, targeting towards that, avoiding tightly coupled solutions. We want to go to modern integrations, so the utilization of APIs and events for building our integrations. Same principle in the same again. This one is a little bit more interesting. We want to avoid dependencies on the corporate network. Another way to phrase it that I think is even better is to say that when possible, we should use the public internet as the bearer for our application. This means that if your application would be compromised or another application would be compromised, for example, a ransomware attack, it wouldn't affect all of our application landscape. It also drives us to use modern, secure ways of communicating within the applications. So this is something that I would definitely like to push with you, that it's definitely okay to use your own internal network for the application, but we want to start using the public internet as a barrier when communicating with the outside. And on that very topic, cloud-based infrastructure when possible. We do have our own data centers, but we should turn toward cloud-based infrastructure, and we should turn towards using as good of a fit for the infrastructure need as possible. And what I mean by that is basically going up the stack, looking for the SaaS option, looking for the PaaS option, and only when actually needed, use those virtual machines. We should also start to actually try to keep everything as code, no matter if it's configuration, if it's the application or the infrastructure. This takes some time to get up initially, but once again, going back to the inner source mindset, if someone else has already developed this and you can basically copy it and get the template to start from, then you speed up this process a lot more. So by having this type of shared visions of what we're doing, it's a lot easier to build upon one another. We want to be able to deploy continuously. I mean, the DevOps mindset. And this doesn't need to mean that we release continuously as well. A lot of the products we actually don't want to release every other day. We want to do a release when it suits us. So we should be able to decouple the deployment process itself. That should happen continuously, having these small iterative pieces that we add on top of the application to ensure quality control and security measures. Meanwhile, we should be able to release whenever business needs it. We should start using branching policies, and I know that this is obviously something that is done in a lot of the parts of the organization already, but with semi-automatic validation on all changes. So having some type of unit tests running, having a build validation running automatically, but also don't forget to include those 4 pair of eyes to see all code changes, both for quality assurance, but also in terms of ensuring that we have the knowledge sharing within the team. We want to also obviously continuously have security scanning enabled everywhere. From a code perspective, it can be our code, or it should be our code. It should be all of our dependencies, so vulnerability scanning from libraries and packages that we're using. It should be credential scanning. But I mean, that also should happen in our actual environments. We should have some type of security posture analysis of the things that we are running in our production environments. And the final thing, the 10th commandment, the use of AI to augment all parts of the dev process. And I think that you are already familiar with it, but there is a product called GitHub Copilot. Right after this session, my colleague David will talk a little bit more about it. Make sure to check it out. So another thing that we need to consider is to establish common platforms. And just to give one sentence on why do we need to establish common platforms, the answer would be that so that we don't solve the same problem multiple times. So some of the plumbing and groundwork should actually happen centrally, because we don't want all of the divisions and the business units to do it by themselves. And Sophia already mentioned it in the opening session, but we need to really consider this, that platform is an internal product. It is not a project. It's not those 300 millions that we throw on saying that we should create developer experience. And after 3 years time, we're done. Now we have developer experience. It is a continuous process. It will be a continuous team doing it. And with the agile mindset of being close to our users, we need to figure out what are their issues and try to solve them within the domain of our platform. So the second note on that very thing would then be dare to try instead. If we don't have to invest those 300 millions, maybe we invest 2 millions or 5 millions or 10 millions, then we need to actually give that opportunity. We need to dare to try. And that in itself needs to prove value. It's not okay to say that you will get this value in several years' time. It should be months, maybe quarters, and then they should be able to prove that value. And if we realize during this process that, no, this is actually not something that is common across a large part of the organization. All of the divisions or business units are creating their own separate solutions for these platforms anyway. then maybe we shouldn't have them. Then we are way too far away from our community, our developers, and we don't prove the value. So then just slice that product and don't have it as a platform. And there are some examples, obviously, of what platforms that exist already today or what's being discussed. The cloud platform, I guess many of you are familiar with. That's where we get our Azure landing zones or Azure subscriptions with some security policies in place, where we get some access control by design, where you have the chargeback in place so that we can use the same enterprise agreement across Sandvik, but still have chargeback and all of the costs. We have the integration platform for API and the event discoverability, and so that we can start collaborating a little bit easier with one another. We have the source code, which is GitHub, which I will actually deep even further into. The developer portal was mentioned. We hope to launch that, as mentioned before summer. There's discussions all around the organization on data platforms. Some divisions are already starting to build it on their own. My question is, why should we build that on their own? At least to me, the data platform is really the place where we connect the data providers with the data consumers. The platform is not responsible for saying what data is in the platform or who should have access to that data. That's the responsibility of the data providers. But to be that platform level is something that I believe could be a central service. Same thing, Kubernetes. We are having lots of Azure Kubernetes services running in Azure right now. If we're going to run AKS clusters, then I definitely think that there is a need for managed Kubernetes platform. This is a discussion that is ongoing as well within group. If you need any more information on any of these things, please jump into the community in Teams or join the collaboration box, and I'll try to share the details. Okay, so what is the big difference then between what group have been doing or SITs have been doing historically and what we mean that we want to do with the platforms? So let's take GitHub, for example. Developer experience started to work as the GitHub owners just before this year started. So GitHub Copilot was actually the first Copilot that was launched within Sandvik. And I actually credit ourselves quite a lot of this. So what we did is that we heard from the developers that this is a product that really is interesting to us. So rather than all of the different divisions having to go through the process of evaluating, okay, how will the agreement look like with Microsoft? Is this okay from a data regulatory perspective? Is this okay from a security perspective? We actually pushed that centrally, and we had all of those dialogues, and we actually could figure out that yes, we can make this work within all of these domains. So we launched it. GitHub Advanced Security is another type of that platform product that we want to see more adoption of, but then we need to be able to support users on how to use it. We talked about the inner source enablement. Before we came into the platform, we basically replicated our organizational structure in the business with the organizational structure on the GitHub platform, saying that each and every team is their separate bubble. That's being a complete anti-pattern towards the inner source mindset, but it also means that all of the organizations need to figure out themselves, how do we configure a GitHub platform in a good way? And there are more capabilities coming. We have code spaces, which is the upcoming session with David that I strongly suggest that you tune into. We can talk about integrating external users. It's exactly the same story there as well, that we need to somehow think about how do we actually collaborate with people outside of Sandvik. It's not good that they own the source code, but they shouldn't see everything as well within our organization. So that's also now implemented so that we can bring in externals and they only see the things that they are actively working on, not being part of our inner source mindset. There are more examples in here of what a platform team would be doing, but it's all of these things that we don't want all organizations to figure out, but that everyone is benefiting from. And throughout all of this, it's obviously about support and migration. So we're talking a lot about these platforms. I'm talking about the central perspective of things, but it's key throughout all of this that we retain autonomy. So please remember that this is not something that's being enforced upon you. If you have specific needs within any of these domains, you're free to roam on your own, but these platforms should really give you a paved road to be more efficient in the work that you're doing and to be able to focus on the value-adding activities. So one way that I just want to mention was the North Star workshop. We had it last week where we invited people from all of the BAs and from Group IT and discussed what are the needs for the future? What does good look like in several years, not what's happening in the next quarter, to try to align on these different domains. And these development guidelines that I showed before, those were part of that discussion. So we need to discuss between the business, what do we actually do? So just to conclude very, very briefly, I know that we are running out of time. The digital shift and developer experience is key, not only to Sofia, but basically to the future of Sandvik. Agile and MVP mindset is really what brings us the value and the speed that we need to realize this. And we need to start utilizing our size, but retaining the autonomy within the organization. Thank you for tuning in to this first masterclass session. Once again, I'm Matthias Falk. You are more than welcome to join me in the collaboration box, Dance Box 1630. And also in Teams, click that small plus in the top right, click join team, and you will find the Sandvik DevX. If you are not within the Sandvik environment, you can still join the Sandvik DevX. Please just send me a message or an email and I'll make sure to add you. That's it. Have a great rest of the disco days, folks. See you later.